Alright everybody, welcome back! Now while the F-111 may have been the hype aircraft for this patch, personally I wasn't that excited for it. This was the plane that I was excited for. This is the MiG-29G, and it is the brand new top tier for the Germans, and yeah, it's actually the best MiG-29 in the game, which the Germans actually get for once. Now let me explain a little bit. So, you know we already had the MiG-29 SMT, we already had the other MiG-29s. This is basically like the MiG-29-912 had a baby with the SMT. So, to explain, there are basically technically four different MiG-29 flight models in the game, right? You have the 912 and the 913, then you have the MiG-29 SMT, which we already had. Now, the 912 and the 913 are basically the same plane. Now, they do have slightly different flight models. The 912 is technically a little bit lighter and has a little bit less fuel than the 913, which is the one the Soviets had. The Germans had the lighter one before. But in actual practice, it basically made zero difference in the game. Now, the SMT came last patch, and that thing was much, much, much heavier. And we're talking like so bad that it would lose a dogfight to an F4E. Now, I did hear that it did get a bit of a buff this patch. I haven't actually gotten to test it out myself, so take that with a grain of salt. But regardless, it was in a very poor state. Now, what Gaijin has done with the MiG-29G is they've given us a MiG-29 that's technically slightly heavier, but it has slightly better engines than the 912, but doesn't have the heavier airframe, and also went ahead and gave it the R-27ET and the R-73 as well. Now, the R-27ET is an interesting missile. What I'm more interested in the R-73, and we'll talk about here in a little bit, but flight performance-wise, what does this give you? Well, you're the fastest plane in the game, pretty much in the deck. I mean, the F-111 is faster, I believe, but that's not this PR anyways, and you're going to be the fastest jet in every match. And you are much better off than the SMT when it comes to a dogfight. Only problem is you will still lose to an F-16 basically every time, unless they are stupid. If the F-16 player is stupid and just sits in front of you like this guy does right here, then sure, you know, you can get away with it. It's still a competitive airframe at top tier. It's not like you're something like an F-4S or MiG-23, for example. It's just in a 1v1 dogfight, you are going to lose every single time against a competent F-16 player, especially the F-16As. You have a bit of a better chance with the F-16C since it is heavier and not quite as good in performance. Same for the F-16D, which is the heaviest and the worst performing out of all the F-16s. But it is just something to consider. You're no longer the top dog when it comes to flight performance. The MiG-29 got a nerf while the F-16 got a buff. Still competitive, just not amazing. What this means is that you want to avoid getting into any kind of sustained one-on-one dogfight with an F-16. You still have the advantage when it comes to AOA for the most part. Your goal is going to be to try and get your guns on, or your missiles on, or whatever else, shoot them, and get on out of there. And luckily, you do have the R-73, which does help. The Gish-30 is also an excellent weapon. I'm actually a really big fan of this gun. They did gimp it a little bit I don't know if it's this patch or what, but it feels like guns aren't doing as much damage as they used to do. So I'm not 100% sure if that's just me or what, but as long as it does damage, this gun is incredible. It has great velocity, a good fire rate. I've always been a fan of the 30 mil guns that the Russians have, and this is basically like an NR30 on massive steroids, so I am a big fan. Now, the star of the show, of course, is going to be these R-73s, and the R-73 is just such a gamer missile. It is by far my favorite missile at top tier right now. It just combines pretty much everything that you want out of a missile. Now, technically, this does have the R-73E. It makes zero difference in game. They are identical at the moment. The only difference in real life was that the R-73E had a bigger gimbal limit. It's just an export R-73. It went from 40 degrees gimbal limit to 45 degrees. Currently, the R-73E is correct and has the actual correct 45 degrees. For whatever reason, they gave the normal R-73 that as well. So I don't know if they'll revert it, but going forward, you won't expect the R-73E to get changed. It'll just be the R-73 getting nerfed if they decide to do it at all. To be honest, an extra 5 degrees in gimbal limit doesn't make a massive difference either way, because these missiles are amazing regardless. Like, I mean, you just saw that F-14 just get absolutely beamed. That was like a 2.5 kilometer shot. Followed him through his flares. Of course, it is an F-14 and it's very hot, but 9 times out of 10, these missiles just aren't going to care. And this F-16 does manage to flare my R-73. Not 100% sure how he managed to do that, but for the most part, these missiles have been flying through flares, even side and front aspect, and that's one thing the 9M is not really capable of doing. Side aspect, sure. Front aspect, no, not at all. Just a quick refresher, the reason the R-73 is so good when it comes to actually defeating, flaring targets is because it shrinks the secret head field of view down after you launch it down to 0.75 degrees. The M9M, it goes ahead and turns itself off whenever it sees flares, which is great for someone flying in a straight line, but if the target flares and then turns, the missile won't know where the plane was going before, and then it'll just lose track. So just got something to keep in mind. Now, the R-73 isn't the only thing that comes with MiG-29G that's new compared to the earlier MiG-29. You also get the R-27ET, and while this missile is probably worse than the R-27ER, I mean, the ER is still the best radar missile in the game, the ET is a ton of fun to use, and honestly, I think it's more fun to use than the ER, even though it is definitely not as much of a guaranteed kill. So what do you get with the R-27ET, or should I say R2E7T1? No idea what's going on there. I can't believe that made it to live server. But in any case, it has a little bit less range than the R-27ER. It is still the longest range IR missile in the game by far as I'm aware. It has an excellent motor, still plus 35 Gs, all the good stuff. Of course, it has radar slaving. It has a massive secret head gimbal limit, and it does actually have, your IRCCM. It has gate width, just like the R-73. Now, it's a little bit different than the R-73s. The R-73, as you can see right there, it just doesn't really care, even side or front aspect most of the time, as long as it's close enough up. Now, it is easier to flare the R-27ET from the front or sides, just because the field of view is only 1.33 degrees, while the R-73's is 0.75, which means it can see more flares overall. Now, if the missile is rear aspect at range, the R-27ET is less sensitive to flares than it is to planes. And by the way, you saw that nasty high-off foresight shot? Men never even saw it coming. But what this means is that, rear aspect at least, the R-27ET is more flare resistant at longer ranges than the R-73. But in all aspect, at close range, the R-73 is going to be your better option. Like I said, to be honest, I would probably say the ER is a better missile, but I still have a ton of fun whenever I am using this ET, so... Overall, what are y'all's thoughts on the patch so far? It's been out for a couple days now. Personally, what I've been enjoying the most, of course, is this MiG-29G. It's really nice having the good missiles on an actually, not bad platform. I've actually also been enjoying tanks as well. I've been using the new Italian helicopter. If y'all are interested in seeing some gameplay of that, let me know. I've been thinking about making a video on it. In any case, I hope y'all did enjoy the video. This has been a pretty fun time to make, actually. I'll catch y'all next time, so peace, y'all.